Welcome back to Hidden Truth Revenge, the channel where quiet people finally say the thing out loud, and where the paperwork nobody wanted to read turns out to be the only honest thing in the house. If you have ever been the one your family counted on without ever asking you first, stay with me. My name is Tanya Thurman. I'm 34, a gunnery sergeant in the Marine Corps, and I sign for everything I touch. On June 12 I was 7,000 miles from Guthrie, Oklahoma, when my lender emailed me at 4 in the morning. 3 credit lines had been opened in my name while I was deployed. My sister opened them. My mom helped her do it. When I finally got my mother on the phone, she didn't apologize. She said Robin was struggling, and I wasn't using my credit anyway. So I did the only thing the bank would accept. I filed the police report, not to punish anybody, just to get my own name back. 11 days later my mother called me screaming about something I hadn't even known was coming. And that was the easy part. Camp Kinser sits on the west side of Okinawa, in a strip of warehouses between the highway and the sea. I ran a supply section there for 6 months. My job is Supply Administration and Operations Chief. Stripped of the title, it means I count things and I sign for them. On paper I held a CMR, a Consolidated Memorandum Receipt. It is a list of government property with exactly one person's name at the bottom of it. Mine came to just under $4 million. Generators, pallets of camouflage netting, ratchet straps by the case in a container that smelled like hot rubber every afternoon by 10. My rule was simple and I never once bent it. If my name is on it, I can walk you to it. I could tell you which pad the generator sat on, and which pallet the netting came off. Marines used to joke that I would inventory the ocean if somebody handed me a clipboard. I took that as a compliment because it was mostly true. Okinawa runs 14 hours ahead of Guthrie. My breakfast was my mother's dinner from the day before, and every call I made home was a small act of arithmetic. I got good at it. I could tell you what time it was on Noble Avenue without looking, the way some people always know where north is. Every month since April of 2018, I sent $600 home by allotment. That is an automatic deduction. The Marine Corps takes it before the rest ever reaches me. My father died that March. The first allotment went out 3 weeks after the funeral, and I never turned it off. The 87th one went out on the 1st of June. $52,200 if you add it up, and I never did. I inventoried everything I touched for 16 years. I never once asked what that money paid for. The house was 1,180 square feet of brick on half an acre on Terrapin Lane in Hubert, North Carolina. That is 20 minutes from my permanent duty station at Camp Lejeune, and about 1,000 miles from anybody who shares my last name. It had a pole barn with a dirt floor. It had a pecan tree at the back corner of the lot leaning slightly the way old pecans lean. The listing photos were bad. I made an offer anyway. I was buying it with a VA loan, the home loan benefit you earn by serving. My loan officer was a patient man named Terrence Ordway. He worked out of Coastal Carolina Home Lending. Closing was set for August 18, 2025. I would still be in transit from deployment. A real estate attorney named Bernice Lofton held my power of attorney. She would sign the papers for me. I had a folder on my laptop with the inspection report and the appraisal. There was a photo of that pecan tree in it. I looked at it more than I want to admit. 16 years in, I had a truck, a storage unit in Jacksonville, and a savings account. I had never owned a wall. My father rented his whole life. He died in a house that belonged to a bank. It also belonged to my mother's name, and to a probate file. One night on the phone I told Robin about it. This would be the first thing I owned with one name on the paper. Then I stopped talking because I heard how that sounded, and I didn't like how much I meant it. Ordway called it a clean file. He said underwriting would do one last credit pull before the commitment letter came out. Standard practice. Nothing to worry about. He said it the way you say a thing you have said 400 times. I wrote the date down anyway because that's what I do. 2 weeks before the email, I ran a joint inventory with the section I was taking over from. That is a slow, dull, unglamorous ritual. Two people walk a warehouse with a list and touch every line on it. On the second day we came up short. A generator set was missing two of its supporting items, the small components that are supposed to travel with the machine, a cable and a tool kit. Not a fortune. A few thousand, maybe. The Marine who signed before me had rotated home in April. The paperwork, though, had already rolled over. The list had my name on the bottom of it now. Staff Sergeant Reuben Calder was standing next to me with the clipboard, and he said what almost anybody would say. "Sign it, Gunny. It's for line items on a machine nobody's touched since March. In 6 months it'll clear itself." He wasn't being lazy. He was being kind in the way people are kind when they want to spare you a paperwork winter. I told him to pull the forms for a lost property investigation. That meant a formal report, statements, a review by an officer, and a determination of whether I was financially liable. It meant my name attached to a discrepancy in writing on purpose where anybody could read it. It slowed my whole section down for 2 weeks. It also put a small ugly line in my record. A board could see that line someday. Calder asked me why. I told him the thing I had been telling Marines since I was a corporal. You sign for it or you don't. There's no third column. He laughed because it sounded like a slogan. And I let him. It wasn't a slogan. It was the only rule I had that had never failed me. 3 months later I found out where I had built my own third column. I also found out how long I had been filling it. The email came in at 4:30 in the morning on June 12. I was awake because I am always awake at 4:30. Ordway's subject line was calm. The body was not. Underwriting had run the final credit pull and found 3 trade lines opened in the last 90 days. A trade line is just an account as the credit bureaus see it. My debt-to-income ratio had gone through the ceiling. The file was suspended pending explanation. I read it twice. Then I sat down on the edge of my rack. I pulled my own credit report over the Morale Wi-Fi. It took 11 minutes and dropped twice. Sooner Plains Federal Credit Union, a signature line of credit, $9,400, opened March 14. Holbrook's Home Center, a store card, limit $6,200, balance $5,980, opened April 2. Century First Bank, a credit card, limit $11,500, balance $9,500, opened May 9, $24,880. 2 of the 3 were 60 days past due. I want to tell you that I felt something dramatic. What I actually felt was the specific flat calm I get during an inventory when the count comes up wrong. You stop. You don't argue with the number. You go find out where the number came from. So I scrolled down to the identifying information block, the part nobody reads. Then I looked at the address of record on all 3 accounts. 1114 East Noble Avenue, Guthrie, Oklahoma. My mother's kitchen. The house with the chest freezer on the back porch and the storm door that sticks. Somebody had opened 3 accounts in my name, and they had not even bothered to invent a place to send the mail. Here is what I did before I called anyone. I opened my selection folder. 6 weeks earlier my name had come out on the slate for Marine Security Guard Detachment Commander. January 2026 Class Quantico. That is the program that runs the security detachments at American embassies. Getting picked is not a small thing. It is a billet. That means special duty outside your regular occupational field. In my career field it is the door you walk through. Without it you are not competitive for Master Sergeant. It is also the most financially invasive screening in the Marine Corps. They look at your credit like a bank looks at a stranger. There is a whole framework for it in the security clearance world, a set of guidelines, and the financial one is not subtle. Delinquent debt is treated as a vulnerability because people who owe money can be leaned on. On top of that, clearances are not reviewed once a decade anymore. They are monitored continuously by automated systems that pull records and flag them. 2 accounts at 60 days past due heading toward charge-off would eventually surface on their own. I also knew precisely that I had a duty to self-report significant financial problems when they arose, not when convenient. When they arose, I closed the folder. I told myself I would report it once I had the full picture. Once I knew whether it was fraud or a clerical horror. Once I knew whether I could fix it in an afternoon. That sounded professional. It sounded like judgment. I said the word data out loud to my empty room like a person building an alibi. It took me 6 weeks to admit what I was actually doing. I was waiting to see if the problem would disappear on its own. I was hoping it would go quietly before anyone official knew it existed. I called at 9 that night, which was 7 in the morning in Guthrie. Robin didn't pick up. I called again 11 minutes later. It rang once and went dead. That is what a phone does when somebody presses the side button. Then it went straight to voicemail and stayed there. So I called the house. My mother answered on the second ring, cheerful in the middle of her own sentence, the way she always does. She asked if I was eating. She said the commissary over there probably didn't have decent tomatoes. She told me about a hailstorm that came through on the 9th. It put dents in the hood of Robin's car. She told me about the Kirkland's roof. She told me about a woman at church whose name I have never once been able to place. I let her run. I have let her run my whole life. Then I told her I had been going through my credit report, and I read her the 3 names. Sooner Plains. Holbrooks. Century First. I read the dates too. There was a silence on that line that I could measure. Not a gasp. Not a what. 3 full seconds of a woman deciding which sentence to use. Then she said, very evenly, "We'll talk about that when you're home." That was it. She didn't ask how that could have happened. She didn't say, "That's not possible," or "Somebody's stolen your information," or "Oh my God, honey." She moved to the next thing on her list, which was whether I'd been to see about my knee. My mother is a warm woman. She remembers every birthday in a family of 31 people. That morning I read her 3 creditors and 3 dates. The most frightening thing in the world was that she was not surprised. Opal Vance called me back at midnight my time. She is my father's older sister, 71, and she has never in her life let a phone ring more than twice. I asked her a narrow question because narrow questions are the only kind that work in my family. I asked what was new at Robin's place. She told me about the furnace, new unit put in the first week of April. New flooring through the front room. Robin had told everybody that Tanya was helping with it. Opal said that last part. Then she stopped in an odd place in the middle of the next sentence. She asked me whether it was still that awful humid over there. I let her change the subject. I have thought about that pause more than almost anything else in this story. Then I did what I do, which was work the problem like a movement plan. Emergency leave exists for a death or a grave illness, verified through the Red Cross. Credit fraud is not on that list, and it should not be. My legal office on the island could notarize a document, but the credit union needed a sworn affidavit and an identity theft report. That report had to be filed where the accounts were opened. That is Logan County, Oklahoma, not Okinawa. Not by fax. I could not walk into a branch. I could not sit down across a table from my sister. I could not drive 6 minutes to my mother's house. I could not stand in her kitchen and make her look at me. That kitchen was the only place this was ever going to be decided. I had 39 days left on that island. 39 days of watching a thing burn from a distance where you cannot even smell the smoke. Robin picked up 4 days later on the 17th. She did not say sorry. She gave me a status report. She said 2 payments had gone through already. She said Marcus was getting a bonus in September. She was going to catch up the Century First card. Then she would start knocking down the credit union. She said the word "we" a lot. She used a tone I recognized from her 10th grade progress reports. She was not scared of me. She was managing me. Then she said the thing that told me exactly what house I grew up in. She said, "Just let me handle it." My little sister is 31 years old. She has worked the bakery counter on and off for 9 years. She has started and folded 2 small businesses. Both times somebody quietly ate the loss. She talks about her own life in the passive voice. And once you hear it, you cannot stop hearing it. The card got opened. That happened back in March. It ended up going through. Nothing in her account of the last 90 days had a person doing it. I asked her a direct question. I asked who put my social security number on the application. There was a pause and then she sounded almost puzzled, almost relieved to have a clean answer for me. She said, "Mom said it was fine." So it was not a secret. It was not a scheme cooked up at 2 in the morning by a desperate woman with a stolen envelope. It was approved. Somewhere in my mother's kitchen, my consent had been discussed and granted by someone else on my behalf. I got my mother back on the phone that Sunday. I had written out what I was going to say, which tells you something. I did not need it. She answered the question before I finished asking it. She answered it the way you explain an oven to a renter. Robin was struggling. The furnace in that trailer had been out since February, and there was a 9-year-old sleeping in it. Marcus's hours had been cut back in the winter. And you, she said, you weren't using your credit anyway. She said that last part gently. It was not an accusation, and it was not a defense. It was an observation about a resource. I said the words identity theft. I said them flat, without heat, because I wanted to hear what would come back. My mother laughed, not a cruel laugh, a confused one. The short surprised sound you make when a stranger uses a legal term for something ordinary in your own house. She said, "Tanya, that's your sister." Then she said the sentence I have carried in my chest ever since. She said it kindly, like she was reminding me of a family recipe. You had it to give. That's all being family is. I sat on the concrete outside the chow hall with the phone at my ear. The container yard lights were out in front of me. I had spent 7 years believing I was generous. It turns out I had been a line item, and the line item was performing exactly as expected. I got off the phone wondering how old that rule was. I wondered who else in that house had lived under it before me. There is a bank of phones in the corner of the chow hall for people calling the States. For 4 nights I stood at the end of it with a notepad. It was the middle of the night my time. I was working the American business day. I called Sentry first. A polite young man in a call center explained that they could not open a fraud investigation without a completed fraud affidavit. I asked what the affidavit was. He read it to me. It is a sworn statement signed under penalty of perjury declaring that a specific person used my identifying information without authorization. He said it also had to be accompanied by an identity theft report from law enforcement. I asked if there was a version of this where nobody got reported. He was quiet for a second and then said, "No, ma'am. Not one that removes the debt." So I priced the other way out. $24,880 was almost exactly my down payment, and my closing costs, and my cushion for a new roof someday. I could pay it. I could pay all of it in one wire and be a woman with no house, and no savings and my mother's approval. Then I read further and found the last joke in it. Paying the accounts would not remove them from my credit report. They would sit there for 7 years as accounts I opened and struggled to pay. Underwriting would still see them in August. There were 3 ways out of this thing. I called all 3. Not one of them existed. Rhonda Baird is a fraud analyst at Sooner Plains Federal Credit Union. She is 45 and she talks the way a good corpsman talks, slow and exact, no wasted comfort. She took my call at 7 in the morning her time, and she stayed on the line for 50 minutes. She confirmed the signature line of credit, $9,400, funded March 14th. She confirmed the application had come in through the online portal. Then she said something and stopped in the middle of it. She said the application was submitted online, but there was in-person verification at the branch. I asked what that meant. She said she was not able to discuss another member's file. I asked it a different way. She said politely, in a voice that had gone careful, that she was not able to discuss another member's file. So somebody had walked into a branch on Noble Avenue in March. They had documents in a folder. They stood at a counter and vouched for me. Rhonda told me the rest of it plainly. To remove my name from that obligation, she needed the sworn affidavit and a police report. There was no other path. No manager. No exception. No letter from a gunnery sergeant that would substitute. Then she told me the part one did not think hard enough about. I was too focused on getting my own name back. She said once that report exists, our systems act on their own findings. She said, nobody here gets to unfind fraud. I thanked her. I hung up. I stood in the dark by a bank of payphones in Okinawa. I could not stop wondering who had stood at that counter in March. People always want to know how somebody like me got caught. So I built a timeline in columns the way I build an inventory sheet. I am going to give it to you straight. That includes the parts that make me look bad. February of 2024, before my last deployment, I placed an active duty alert on my credit. That is a protection for deployed service members. It requires lenders to take extra steps to verify identity. It is good for 1 year. Mine expired in February of 2025 on schedule exactly as the law is written, 1 month before my sister walked into a branch. January 14, 2025, I lifted the credit freeze at all 3 bureaus. I did not do that carelessly. You are required to lift it to let a lender pull your file, and I was getting pre-approved for the house. My orders to Okinawa then moved up by 3 weeks, which is a thing that happens. I refroze the bureaus from a computer in the morale center the night before I flew. The third session timed out at the confirmation screen. The bureau mailed the confirmation letter, which is standard, to the address of record. That address was 1114 East Noble Avenue. I had a form filled out to change it. It was in my go bag in a folder with a stamp already on it. So no, nobody broke in. I unlocked the door myself so I could buy a house. Then I asked them to mail the key. They mailed it to the one address in America I most needed locked. I landed at Cherry Point on July 21st. On the 23rd I put a duffel in my truck. I drove 1,550 miles to Guthrie. I stopped for the night outside Memphis because I am not 22 anymore. I got in Thursday evening, and I did not go to the house. I got a room at the Blue Stem Motel on Division Street. That is 6 minutes from my mother's front door. I lay on top of the covers with my boots still on. I had gone by Noble Avenue once in daylight just to look. Through the storm door I could see the chest freezer on the back porch. A stack of mail sat on top of it, 6 inches deep. It was rubber-banded, and my name was on the top envelope. Several of them had been opened, not steamed, opened with a thumb. Friday morning I walked into the post office 2 blocks off Division Street. I asked for a change of address form, the one they call 3575. I filled it out standing at the counter with a pen from my chest pocket. Old address, 1114 East Noble Avenue. That mailbox had carried my name for 16 years since the summer I enlisted at 18. Every duty station, every re-enlistment packet, every Christmas card from every Marine I ever served with had gone there first. New address, a box in Hubert, North Carolina that I had rented on Wednesday for $11 a month. The clerk asked me if it was temporary or permanent. I said permanent. She stamped the receipt and slid it across, and I folded it in 4 and put it in my wallet. 2 hours later Robin texted me. Mrs. Holman says the mailman put a moved sticker on Mom's box. What are you doing? Nobody in my family ever mentioned $24,880 to me. They called about the mailbox. My mother came to the motel that evening at 7 with a foil pan on the passenger seat, chicken and rice, still warm, with a paper towel under the lid. She did not want to come inside. We stood in the parking lot under the light on the pole while trucks went by out on Route 33. She never mentioned the money. Not one figure, not one account, not one date. She talked about the Holmans. She talked about how it would look. A woman down the street had already asked her a question at the Sonic. She said, "We don't do things that way in this family." She said, "Your father would be sick over this." That one landed and she knew it would. And I do not think she planned it. That is the part that is hard to explain about my mother. She is not scheming. She is fluent. Two of my aunts called me that same night, an hour apart. Both of them opened with "How are you holding up, honey?" Both of them arrived at the same destination. Neither one asked about the 3 accounts. Before she left, my mother put her hand flat on my forearm. She used to do that when I had a fever. She said it again, softer this time, almost as a comfort. You had it to give. That's all being family is. I stood there with a warm pan in my hands, and I finally understood the shape of the thing I was in. This fight was never going to happen on paper. It was going to happen in kitchens and parking lots and phone calls between women who have known each other for 50 years. And on that ground, I was never going to win. Not once. Not ever. Saturday I drove out to Robin's, 6 minutes the other direction. It is a double wide on a rented lot at the edge of town. There is a dog run and no dog. Marcus Kessler met me at the steps. He is 34, a lead installer on heating and cooling systems. He is the only man I have ever seen apologize with his whole body. He made coffee. He said "I'm sorry" about 4 different ways, and every one of them was real. Wyatt came around the corner of the trailer with a 5-gallon bucket and made me look at a bullfrog in 3 inches of water. He told me its name was Chief. He is 9. He has my father's ears. Inside, the front room had new luxury vinyl plank flooring, gray, still with the sticker residue at the threshold. The new furnace hummed in the hall closet. Marcus got a napkin off the counter and started drawing me a payment plan. Arrows, brackets, the word month written 3 times. There was not a single number anywhere on it. He kept saying, "If we can just get the store card knocked down." I sat there in that clean, warm front room. A kid's frog bucket dripped on the step outside. I came within about 4 seconds of taking that napkin. I almost folded it into my wallet next to the post office receipt. Then Marcus said, half to himself, staring at the arrows, "I told Robin not to use my terminal." He stopped. He looked at me. Then he looked at the wall. He did not bring it up again for the rest of the afternoon. I did not ask. I should have asked. That sentence cost that man everything he had, and it took 11 more days to do it. Ordway called Monday at 9 his time. He was still kind about it, which somehow made it worse. Underwriting had reviewed the file, and would hold it open for 10 business days. In that window I needed either the trade lines removed from my report, or a formal fraud case on record with the creditors. My rate lock expired August 15th, closing was August 18th. He said, "I've seen these go both ways, Gunnery Sergeant." He said it the way a doctor says most people do fine. I drove to the credit union that afternoon, and asked for Rhonda Baird. She came out to the lobby. We sat at one of the little round tables by the window. I asked her the only question I had left. I asked if there was a version of this where no police report ever got filed, and my name still came off the note. She did not sigh and she did not perform any sympathy at me, which I appreciated more than I can tell you. She said, "I can't unring it without the report." "I'm sorry." Then she said, "And take that as a real apology, not a script." I walked out through the double doors into that white Oklahoma light, and got in my truck, and put my hands on the wheel. I sat in that parking lot for 40 minutes, and never turned the key. A woman came out and loaded a car seat into a sedan 2 spaces over. A man walked past with a deposit bag. And I sat there doing the arithmetic on the only remaining road, which ran directly through the front counter of the Guthrie Police Department. On July 31st I walked into the Guthrie Police Department at 8 in the morning. Detective Nidita Coyle came out to the front counter. She took me back to a room with a table and 2 chairs. There was a poster about bicycle registration on the wall. She is 39. She did not offer me coffee. She did not tell me she was sorry. By then that was the kindest thing anybody had done in a month. She had me go through it line by line, and I gave her all of it, including the columns that made me look like a fool. That I lifted my own freeze. That I let my active duty alert expire. That I never changed my address. That I sent $600 a month to that house for 87 months, and never once asked for a single receipt. Coyle wrote it all down without a flicker. When we got to the end, she turned the statement around. She put her finger on the signature block. She said, "I need you to hear something before you do that. Once this is a report, it belongs to the county, not to you." She said, "You can't call me in a week and take it back." I asked her if people try. She said, "All the time." My father's sister's voice was in my head. So was my mother's hand on my forearm. Underneath both of them was my own voice from a warehouse in Okinawa. "You sign for it or you don't. There's no third column." I signed. I drove back to the Blue Stem and slept. It took 11 days for me to find out what I had actually signed. The next 10 days were paperwork, and paperwork is boring, and I want you to know that on purpose. I filed a report on the federal identity theft site and printed the recovery plan it generated. I sent block requests to all 3 credit bureaus. There is a federal provision for it, 605B. It lets an identity theft victim have fraudulent accounts blocked from her file. I attached a copy of the police report to each one. Certified mail, 3 green cards. I built a spreadsheet, a column for the creditor, a column for the case number, a column for the date sent, a column for the date an answer was due. I called Calder one night from the motel to check on my section, and told him where I was at. He said respectfully, "Gunny, nobody would have known." I laughed and let it go because he was not wrong. I did not have an answer yet that would survive being said out loud. Guthrie went silent. My mother did not call. Robin did not call. Even Opal did not call. And Opal calls people on their birthdays at 7 in the morning. I read that quiet as good news. I thought the family had decided to let the process work the way you let a doctor set a bone. On day 10 I drove to a home store in Edmond and bought curtains for a house I did not own yet. Day 11 was August 11th. The phone went off at 6:40 in the morning, and my mother was already screaming when I answered. It took me a while to assemble the pieces because she was not telling a story. She was firing debris. 3 things had happened inside 24 hours, and I had decided exactly none of them. Sooner planes had matched their own records. One member had walked in on March 14th and vouched for the application. It was my mother. She had co-signed the note. When the affidavit landed saying the borrower never authorized it, the credit union acted on its own findings under the terms every member signs. They froze her share account and applied the offset provision against the balance. They accelerated the loan on her 2019 pickup. They terminated a 31-year membership and reported it. Her direct deposit bounced back on the 10th. Second, Hallbrook's loss prevention had traced the store card application to an employee terminal and an employee discount code. Marcus was walked out on Friday by a manager named Cheryl Priest. His installer's bond was suspended pending the outcome. He could not take a single job in the state while that file stayed open. Third, Century First had referred the whole thing to the assistant district attorney for Logan County. My mother was shouting so hard the phone was clipping, and then she screamed the sentence at me like a verdict. "You had it to give. That's all being family is." I stood in a motel room in the dark and understood from her own accusation that my mother had been standing at that counter. I tried to stop it. I want that on the record because people hear this story and assume I built a trap. I called Rhonda Baird at 9 that morning and asked her to withdraw the whole thing. She was very quiet and then she explained it to me twice patiently, the way you explain a thing to somebody in shock. Once the institution has documented fraud, it is required to act on that finding. There is no button. The victim does not get to instruct a federally insured credit union to ignore what it found. She said, "I know you didn't want this, and it doesn't matter that you didn't want it." I called the corporate number at Hallbrook's and got the same answer in a colder voice. I called the district attorney's office and left a message that was never going to help anyone. Around 4 o'clock that afternoon my mother called me back and she did not yell. She put Wyatt on the phone. He was breathing the way kids breathe when they have been told to say something. He said, "Aunt Tanya, are you making my dad lose his job?" I said, "No, buddy." It was true, and it was also in some way I still cannot fully take apart, not the whole truth. I told him I loved him. I told him to take care of Chief. Then I hung up. I sat on the end of that motel bed. The light outside went orange. For the first time, I did not know if I was right. Ordway called on August 14th at 11 in the morning. I was in the motel parking lot with the tailgate down, eating a gas station sandwich. He had the fraud documentation. That part had worked, but all 3 trade lines were in active dispute rather than removed. The credit union account was flagged under a litigation hold. Underwriting could not clear a file in that condition. The commitment was withdrawn. My rate lock expired the next day. The sellers took the backup offer on August 20th, which I know because I looked once, which was a stupid thing to do. Bernice Lofton mailed my power of attorney packet back to me and used. There was a short note in blue ink. She was very sorry, and I should call if I tried again. The appraisal and the inspection and the survey came to $1,340 and none of it comes back. I stood there in the heat with half a sandwich in my hand. Then I got out my phone and opened the folder. I looked at that leaning pecan tree. Then I deleted the photo. I know myself and I would have kept opening it. Everybody assumes the worst moment was my mother screaming at 6:40 in the morning. It wasn't. It was an email 4 lines long from a polite man in Jacksonville. The first thing I ever tried to own by myself was gone. I was back at Lejeune on August 25th. My credit report now showed 3 accounts in dispute, 2 of them heading for charge-off. And I sat down one night in my barracks room and read the reporting requirements the way a lawyer reads a lease. The obligation to self-report significant financial issues is triggered when the issue arises, not when it is resolved, not when it is convenient. But here is the honest shape of it. The continuous vetting system would get there on its own eventually, and eventually could be 3 months or 6 months or 9. My disputes were already filed. If the bureaus granted the blocks in November or December, my file would come back clean before any automated flag ever tripped. I would report to Quantico in January with a spotless record. Nobody would ever have to know about that autumn. Nobody would know what had been attached to my name. Calder said it again on a Thursday in the smoke pit. He was not even talking about my case. He meant it as a general observation. Nobody would have known. I opened the self-report form on a Tuesday night at 2200. I typed my name. I typed the first 2 lines of the summary. Then I closed the laptop and went for a run in the dark and did not open it again for 11 days. I flew back for Labor Day weekend because Opal asked me to. She picked me up in her Buick on Saturday afternoon. She drove me to Noble Avenue while my mother was at the church rummage sale. Opal has a key and always has. She walked me through the kitchen and past the pantry. There is a door back there to the room I always thought was storage. She opened it. Single bed against the wall, a dresser with a doily, 1 window low looking out at the downspout, and a strip of gravel. Opal told me that her brother's wife lived in that room until she was 27 years old, that my mother started the practical nursing program in 1982, that she quit it in 1983 because Juanita needed somebody home. And somebody home meant Loretta. Loretta was the one with the paycheck from the hospital cashier's office. She handed her pay envelope over every Friday from the time she was 17. Juanita died in 1994 and by then the room was just where my mother slept. Opal stood in that doorway with her hand on the frame. She said one thing about my mother. She never brought it up again. Not once in all the years since. Your mother has never owned one single thing that was only hers except that account. I stood in a room the size of a supply cage and finally understood that my mother was not attacking me. She was handing something down. It had been handed to her. She had carried it for 46 years. She was doing what people do with a weight like that. She was passing it to the strong one. Desmond Fite was sitting at Opal's kitchen table on Sunday afternoon when we got back. He is 58, gray suit, no tie, a folder squared up in front of him. He is Robin's attorney, and he was polite to me in a way that told me he had done this 100 times. He Laid out terms. He had worked with the assistant district attorney, a woman named Marlene West. The terms were simple enough. I would submit an amended statement calling the 3 accounts authorized family use, an internal misunderstanding between a mother and 2 daughters. Then the office would decline to prosecute Robin. Sooner Plains would reverse the offset and reinstate my mother's membership. Holbrook's would close its file and Marcus's bond would be restored inside 30 days, and he could work again. Fight went through it slowly and let each piece land. Then he told me the price and he did not soften it, which I respected. The $24,880 becomes legally mine. It stays on my report for 7 years and the amended statement is submitted under oath. Opal put her hand over mine on that Formica table. A plate of pecan bars sat in the middle untouched. The kitchen clock was very loud. She said, "Just fix it, honey. Nobody has to be a criminal." Fight left the folder on the table. He set a pen on top of it, squared to the edge, and said he would need my answer within 72 hours. They gave me 72 hours and they used all of it. Robin called Sunday night and cried, and it was not performance. I have heard my sister fake cry since she was 6, and this was not that. She said Wyatt asked her if they were going to have to move again. She said she knew it was her fault. She said it out loud once plainly and then she asked me to sign. Marcus texted me Monday morning. He apologized for putting me in this position. I believe he meant it. In the next message he asked about the bond. Would it really come back in 30 days? And I understood him. A man with no work cannot afford to be noble for very long. 2 aunts called. A cousin I have not seen since 2019 messaged me a photograph of my father. And then Monday evening my mother called, and she did not raise her voice at all. She sounded old, which she had never sounded before. She said, "You're the only one in this family who can fix this." That was the whole argument, and it was a good one because on paper she was right. Look at it as a ledger. Sign, and 4 people are made whole. Robin has no record. Marcus works. My mother has a bank again. Wyatt stays in his school. 1 person pays. It is the person who can pay. The one with steady income and no children. The one with a career that will still be there in 7 years. Every accountant in America would tell you that is the efficient allocation. That was the first time in my life I understood why my mother believes what she believes. On a spreadsheet she is not a villain. On a spreadsheet she is right. Tuesday morning I took the folder out to my truck and read the amended statement the only way I know how to read anything, pen in hand, line by line, a tick in the margin for every line I could verify, a mark for every line I could not. The first 5 lines were fine. They were dates and account numbers and my legal name, and they were all correct. Line 6 said, "I authorized my sister's use of my identifying information." I sat with that line for a long time in a parked truck. The windows were down. A wasp worked the edge of the windshield. Because I could see the entire shape of it now. For 87 months I put $600 into that house and never asked for an accounting. Not one receipt. Not one question. I told myself that asking would turn love into a transaction. That is a beautiful way to say a very simple thing. I did not want to know. That money went somewhere and the somewhere was never written down. I had built a place in that family where the difference could go so that nobody ever had to file a report. 3 accounts in my name were not an accident. They were the logical result of a column I opened in 2018, and never once closed. And if I signed line 6, the column stayed open. My name would still be at the bottom of it. Someday Wyatt would be 19, and need something. There would still be a place in that house to put the difference. I said it out loud in that truck alone to nobody. You sign for it or you don't. There's no third column. And then I understood the harder half of it, which had been waiting for me since June. Refusing to sign their statement was going to be the easy part. The expensive signature was the one I was going to have to put on myself. We met at Opal's kitchen table at 2 on Tuesday afternoon. Fight on one side with his folder. My mother and Robin across from me. Opal at the end next to the stove with her hands in her lap. The ceiling light in that kitchen is yellow. The clock ticks. The pecan bars were still on the plate under plastic wrap, a day older. Fight asked if I had reviewed the statement. I said I had. Then I picked the folder up, squared it, and slid it back across the formica to him with the pen on top and signed. Robin made a small sound. Fight did not move. My mother stood up so fast her chair went over backward. It hit the baseboard. Then she said the worst thing she has ever said to me. She said, "You are always the coldest thing in this house." I did not stand up. I put both hands flat on the table, and I brought my voice down until she had to stop talking to hear me. I said, "I'm not signing my name to a story that isn't true, not even a kind one." And then I said the only other thing I had prepared for the whole room. I said, "Robin can take the diversion. I'm just not writing anybody else's truth for them." Nobody answered me. Opal looked at the stove. I picked up my keys and I left, and the storm door shut behind me the way it always has, twice. 40 minutes later I was in the parking lot of the Bluestem Motel. I stood under the light on the pole. The wind came across Division Street. A truck downshifted out on Route 33. And I made the call that actually cost me something. I called Sergeant Major Lloyd Akin at home on a holiday weekend, and I told him I had a significant financial issue to report. Then I wrote it up that night. I sent it to Charlene Rusk, our battalion security manager. I did it before continuous vetting ever pinged. I did it before I submitted a single page of my embassy duty packet. And I put the ugly columns in it. That I lifted my own credit freeze. That I let my active duty alert lapse. That I never changed my address of record. That I sent 87 allotments to that house, and never reconciled $1 of it. That my own mother co-signed a fraudulent note. I filed a report on myself with exactly the same detail I had filed on that generator set in Okinawa. Akin was silent for about 4 seconds. Then he asked me one question. "Gunny, do you know what this is going to do to your slate?" I said, "Yes, Sergeant Major." September through November was interviews and statements. My self-report triggered a financial review, and a review means an interim flag on your file while it is open. I sat with an investigator in a small room at Lejeune twice. I produced bank statements going back 3 years, the police report, the affidavit, the bureau correspondence, and a 1-page schedule of every dollar of the $24,880. I was told more than once and always politely that the file would probably resolve in my favor. Probably is not a date. In October the Marine Security Guard program pulled me from the slate. That is a form letter. It uses the phrase administratively removed. The January class at Quantico filled without me, 31 seats, and I could name 4 of the people in it. The Master Sergeant Board convened that winter. My record showed no billet. The one I had earned was sitting in a folder marked pending. Careers are built out of timing. I lost a cycle. Akin caught me outside the Chow Hall in November and said it without any ceremony at all. He said, "You did it right. It's still going to cost you." He is not a warm man, and that was not a warm sentence. I intend to keep it anyway for the rest of my life. Calder said his line one last time in the section office, quieter than before, almost like an apology. Nobody would have known. And this time I had the answer and I gave it to him without heat. I said I would have. I signed for it. Nothing about the good part was dramatic. In December all 3 bureaus granted the block. The 3 trade lines came off my credit file. They came off because the affidavit was true when I signed it. It stayed true under every question anybody asked. That is the entire mechanism. There is no clever version. Robin accepted a deferred prosecution agreement in November. Restitution on a schedule, 200 hours of community service, and no conviction if she completes it. Marcus got his bond back in January once the file listed him as a witness rather than a subject. Holbrooks did not take him back. He works for a 2-truck outfit out of cash now. It pays about $9 an hour less. He did the least in this story, and lost the most. I think about that on a schedule. My mother's membership at Sooner Plains was not reinstated. 31 years terminated, reported permanent. She banks at a place in Edmond now through an intermediary program because of the report. None of it healed. Nothing knitted back. What I got instead came in a business envelope on a Thursday in December. 3 of them across 2 weeks, 1 from each bureau. They arrived at a post office box in Hubert, North Carolina. They were addressed to Tanya Thurman. There was no other name anywhere on them. The Financial Review closed in February of 2026 favorably. Being the victim of identity theft is a recognized mitigating condition. The record showed I had reported it myself. Before anyone asked. I kept my clearance. I kept my rank. I lost a year, which is the honest accounting. I rent a duplex in Hubert now, 2 streets over from Terrapin Lane. I made that decision on purpose. I would probably not recommend it. I drove past the house once in January deliberately at about 11 in the morning, and I did not slow down. There was a child's bike lying on its side under the pecan tree, the way kids leave them, front wheel still turned. That was the right ending for that house, and I knew it while I was looking at it. My mother has not called me since November. Opal writes letters, actual letters in blue ink on lined paper. She still thinks I should have signed. She says so about every third one. In February the first restitution payment came. A money order for $75 from Robin made out in her careful bakery handwriting. It came to the box in Hubert. It could not have come anywhere else. Tanya Thurman does not exist at 1114 East Noble Avenue anymore. She has not since a Friday morning in July. A clerk asked me a question at a counter and I answered it. I looked at that money order for a long time. $75 against $24,880. She will be paying it when Wyatt is in high school. I deposited it. Then I wrote her a receipt and mailed it back. I am not running an account in this family that nobody writes down, not even a kind one. I told Opal where I stand, and I told it to her once so nobody could say later that I was vague. I will come to Wyatt's 10th birthday if it is at her house, and not on Noble Avenue. I will bring a present and I will stay for cake, and I will help carry chairs out to the garage afterward, and I will never again send money to anyone in that family for any reason ever. I will be the aunt who shows up. I am not going to be the account. I know exactly what that does and does not fix. That rule in my mother's house is older than she is. It did not die because I refused to sign a paper in September. She will appoint somebody else. It might be Opal who has already started paying my mother's phone bill, and has not told anybody. It might be Wyatt in about 15 years when he turns out to be the steady one. I cannot delete a thing like that. I could only take my own name off it. In January the memo came down on the generator set in Okinawa. Relieved of liability. 2 items formally recorded as lost. File closed. I pinned it to the side of my file cabinet at work. 11 months start to finish to get one name written down correctly. Last week I was paying for coffee in Swansboro. A folded square of paper came out of my wallet with the bills. It landed on the counter, soft at the creases, furred at the corners, the ink gone gray. It still says permanent. I folded it back along the same 4 folds and put it where it lives. A family that quietly appoints one person as its safety net will always call the day she stops falling a betrayal, and she will still be the one who has to write it down. That's my story. 11 days. 1 signature I wouldn't put down, and 1 I put down on myself instead.